Identity is a huge part of New York and Naples. It still changes and retains a strong identity all at the same time. These cities are changing, but we're changing too. The expression is you never step into the same river twice. And so cities function that same way.
Every night, as I close the shades to my bedroom window, I look towards the New York skyline and say, "Good night, New York. I love you." It started out as a funny bit, and then a nightly gratitude ritual. But now, Good Night, New York. I Love You is a new podcast about places we love. So this podcast isn't really about New York. It's about any place we love and why we love it. Because just like finding a soulmate, our relationship with places can feel just as powerful. In each new episode, my guest and I will explore what drives that connection with places, but we'll also explore the relationship between love, places, and connection with community. This is Good Night, New York. I Love You. Hello and welcome to Good Night, New York. I Love You. I'm your host, Jane Marie. Today's guest is Danielle Oteri, an art historian, travel advisor, and writer. Danielle is an Italian-American who splits her time between New York and Naples, Italy. Her work comes from genuine relationships, rigorous research, and a deep connection to Italy through both sides of her family. In today's episode, we dive into Naples and explore the connection to places where we are genetically linked. We also discuss the tension between loving two places and having two cities to call home. Let's dive right in. Hi, Danielle. Welcome to Good Night, New York. I Love You.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I love to start by telling listeners how we are connected.
We are connected through the amazing Rita J. King, and I believe you may have met her randomly in a park, if I remember the story correctly.
Technically, through my uncle. But
Okay.
yes, our first in-person meeting was in a park.
Well, I met Rita when I was looking for venues to host a Gilded Age dinner. And I met Rita in the middle of that process. We just stayed in touch. It took a while. It took years before we actually became friends, but I think we were both captivated by each other and stayed in touch enough that eventually one day we wound up having a conversation that transformed us into very good friends.
Yes, and you both have in common Italian heritage.
We do, from a similar area, the Naples area.
So let's jump right in. Danielle, tell me about a place that you love.
My favorite place in the world is Naples. And it's a place that not everybody loves. Naples is a place that inspires very strong feelings. People either love it or hate it. There is rarely somebody that's like, oh, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Some people think it's a dirty, disgusting hole, and others, like me, think it is absolute heaven on earth. I can't believe it exists, and I'm addicted to it. It's absolutely addictive, and I've heard so many people use the same word.
I love that word addictive. Say more about what you mean. How is it addictive to you? What really feels addictive?
Well, just to like play on the drug metaphors, it is like a shot in the arm when you go there. As somebody who's never really done any drugs, mind you, but it is a place that just jolts you to life. It is so alive, and you feel so alive when you're there, and you feel so human. There are other places that I love, like Florence, Italy, for example, where I studied. I went to graduate school, where my mind feels very alive there. I want to study, I want to think. Of course, all the amazing art and architecture is so inspiring, but it's really all felt in my head, in my mind. And then you go to Naples and you feel it further south in your body, and it's a visceral feeling where you feel deeply connected to this place. And I am genetically deeply connected to this place. But even people who aren't say that they can feel that. It has an intensity that is the thing that either makes you really love it or turns you off completely. It's situated in between two super volcanoes. Mount Vesuvius is the most famous one, of course, and that is the one that you will see in imagery of Naples all the time. But the Campi Flegrei, which is to the west of Naples, it doesn't have a cone. It doesn't look like an iconic volcano. It's an underwater diffused volcano, and it's active. And if that were to ever blow in a really serious way, which is going to happen, it could literally take down all of Europe. There's something about living on the precipice of a volcano. Yay, we might not all be here tomorrow, might as well live for today, but also it is irresistible to live that close to a volcano because it's so beautiful and the food is so good. The vegetables and the fruit that grow in that soil are so extraordinary that for at least 3 to 4 thousand years of human history, people have been living on the slopes of Vesuvius and near the Campi Flegrei because they can't resist it.
Sounds amazing. I haven't been to Naples yet in my travels to Italy. You said you're genetically linked to Naples. When did you first go to Naples?
I really consider my first introduction to Naples to be growing up in New York. New York is a city that is very deeply influenced by Naples. There were so many Neapolitan immigrants that came here. New York, being the pizza capital, is second only to Naples, where pizza was born. And there's a direct reason. There were immigrants from Naples who settled in New York and were among the first pizza makers. New York and Naples both have really good tap water, which is why we also have great pizza. The Feast of San Gennaro, one of the signature events of New York City, even still without a large or almost any immigrant community from Italy anymore, is a huge event, and San Gennaro is the patron saint of Naples. I think it's immediately familiar to anybody who really loves New York.
Mhm.
You will recognize the New York accent in the Neapolitan dialect. One thing that New Yorkers always say if something's really disgusting, it's schivi. And in Italian, the word is schifoso, but in the Neapolitan accent, it's schifoso. So even New Yorkese has some Neapolitan in it. The first time I went, though, was when I was visiting from Florence, where I was studying, and I absolutely loved Florence. And I'm Italian American. All four of my grandparents, well, three of my grandparents are from right around the Naples general area. One is from a little bit further south in Calabria. But I went down from Naples on a weekend. I was looking forward to going, and I was speaking with my language partner in Florence, who was an Italian who was learning English, and we would have sessions where we would trade language. I told her I was going to go to Naples, and she said, "No, you can't go. It's impossible. It's too dangerous. You can't go." And she said I had to go to Parma instead, which is in northern Italy. And I was like, "Yeah, well, Parma looks nice. I like cheese, but I want to go to Naples. This is where my family's from." And I knew I had family still in the area. And she insisted, "No, no, 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 Danielle, you can't go. You can't go. It's so dangerous." But I didn't listen to her and I went. And the second I got off the train station, I'm like, this is the greatest place I've ever seen in my life. Naples was a little rough back then. Naples had a lot of years where the drug activity was really fierce and it was legitimately dangerous in many, many quarters. This was in 2001. And I got out of the train station. There were dogs living in the train station. It was not the Naples that it is today, which is totally transformed. And still, I looked around me and breathed the air and said, this is the greatest place in the world. I loved it immediately and just walked around those first few days with my head swiveling, just feeling a sense of home that I had never experienced in my life.
It was love at first sight.
Absolutely.
I love hearing you describe the similarities between New York and Naples. Am I understanding correctly that you're from New York?
Yes.
Okay. I have had people describe the connection they feel with New York in the very same way, where they just set foot on the ground in New York and they think, oh my God, I love this place. I love the energy. I feel it in my body. It's visceral. And you're describing the same feeling with Naples. Also, I'm seeing the connection between the two places that you're drawing out. I've never heard people make that strong connection. Of course, there's a lot of Italian American immigrants in New York, but hearing Naples specifically makes so much sense.
Yeah, New York was a huge point of emigration. So there are Italian immigrants from every region of Italy, but Naples was particularly big. Boston tends to be mostly Sicilians. Philadelphia got a lot of people from the Abruzzo, but New York was really where most Neapolitans went to.
Yeah. So let's dig into what characteristics you feel like Naples brings out in you.
I feel very human and present and alive, and I don't feel a need for any pretense whatsoever. Not that I feel too strong. It's not as though I'm like covering who I am in other aspects of my life. I present myself pretty honestly, but there are certain environments, of course, where you feel like you have to be polite in a certain kind of way or comport yourself in a particular manner. But in Naples, it just feels completely natural. And perhaps for me, that is because it's my ancestral environment. Like one of my favorite things to do in Naples, I'm not even going to worry about coloring my gray roots before I leave because I love getting my hair done in Naples because everybody has my hair.
Mhm.
Whenever I get my hair cut in New York, inevitably, despite the fact that there are plenty of people here with thick curly hair that likes to be blown out, people always comment, "Oh my God, your hair's so thick." Ugh, always. You go to Naples, they don't complain, and my hair looks amazing. It's a silly thing, but I just feel comfortable. I also really do look very Neapolitan. Nobody thinks that I'm American until I start to speak and they hear my accent and then they go, "What?" They assume that I'm from there. So, yeah, I fit right in and I feel very, very comfortable. But it's also a place that is very hospitable to outsiders. Florence is not a place that's actually very hospitable to outsiders. Now, they have a huge industry of tourism, so they do hospitality very well. It's not to criticize them, but Florence is the kind of place where they didn't have the economic deprivation that Naples had. And Florence has always had industry and university. So people that are from there don't tend to leave. They don't necessarily need to. Whereas so many people in Naples in the past and even today have had to go somewhere else to work. And they have a sense of knowing what it's like to be a stranger. And
Mm.
so in reverse, they are very, very hospitable. But what I love about it is that they are still aggressively Neapolitan. They will still say, "Hey, we do things this way. We eat pizza this way. You better root for our soccer team." But there's no prereq. Just come enjoy everything the way we do. Everybody's welcome to love Naples.
Yeah, I love exploring the places that make us feel at home and make us feel that we can be our 100% authentic selves. And that's what you're describing here. And you felt it immediately, which I think is so amazing. For a listener who maybe hasn't been to Naples or doesn't know much about Naples, what else would you want to share about the culture and what it's like?
It's such an ancient place. And one of the places in the world where I think you can really traverse the ancient world to the modern world within a few steps. So
Mhm.
Naples is a city now that sprawls, and so there are very upscale neighborhoods that are along the waterfront. There's a hill. There's another fancy neighborhood that scales the hill. You can even take a funicular up there. But there's a smaller area called the Centro Storico, the historic center, which is also built on a hill. And at the time when it was first developed, 2,500 years ago, it was a Greek colony. And there was a series of cisterns that were carved out of the tufa stone that had been deposited by a volcanic eruption, I don't know how many gajillions of years ago. There was a Greek city, and then the Romans conquered it, and then it became a Roman city. And then there was a series of mudslides that happened in the 300s that covered those ancient cities, and then the medieval city was built right on top of that. If you go to Naples and you only have a short time, go to the historic center and take the Naples Underground tour. Because during World War II, people were using these underground caverns that they knew of that were quite literally in their basements as shelters. And after World War II, those places were then investigated by archaeologists, and now they've been formalized as tourist sites. You can go on these various journeys into the underground world. You buy a €10 ticket. If you don't have claustrophobia, you can go all the way down to the bottom of the city, walk around a Greek cistern, then walk around a Roman amphitheater, and then walk around a Roman market, and then you enter street level, and it's the ancient world just with sunlight. If you go to Pompeii, of course, you'll see all the ruins there. Pompeii is only about 30 minutes outside of Naples, but if you want to know what it was like to live in Pompeii, just walk around the historic center of Naples. It's almost an exact copy, the way the stores are, the way there are vendors out on the street. It's the same life that's being repeated. It's a place that you can just really, really explore history in a very personal and visceral way. If somebody's like, "Oh, I don't like museums, I don't like history," oh, all right, put that aside for 45 minutes and go take the Naples Underground tour because it's absolute time travel.
That sounds so fascinating. Typically, it would not be my go-to thing, but you do make it sound very appealing. And I know this is the work you do. You tell people about Italy and the places that they should spend their time on if they really want this authentic experience that really teaches them a lot about the place and the culture.
Yeah, and I've been Naples' biggest advocate for a long time. And for years, there were very few people that were taking me up on it. And then that really changed, I want to say in 2015, 2016. And now Naples is a huge tourist destination, but I still hear people repeating these really outdated tropes about, ooh, Naples is dangerous. And I used to get upset when people said those things, but now I'm like, yeah, it's dangerous. Don't go. Shh.
Right. Leave it for us. We'll be
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. No, 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 don't go. Don't go.
You mentioned that you're going to Naples in a couple weeks. How often do you visit?
I go quite a bit. It depends on my work schedule. Last year, I spent more than half the year there. This year, it's been much less. The exchange rate hasn't been kind. Also, I've had other work projects taking me in other directions. But I have to be there at least 2 or 3 times a year, or else I feel like I'm just abandoning a close family member. I stay in the same Airbnb every time I go, so I feel like I have my own apartment there. Everything is just as I left it. I don't even book it on the platform anymore. I just text the owner, hey, I'm coming. As soon as I step outside of the train station, I just fall right into the city. The way I do when I step out of the subway in New York City. The metro in Naples is actually fantastic. It's actually much better than the New York City subway. So the beat of Naples is not that different from the beat of my life in New York.
Right. And you mentioned that you do have family there. Does your life when you go to Naples still revolve around the family, or do you feel like you've created your own independent community? What's it like?
My family is about an hour and a half outside of Naples in a town called Pestum. Now, I have from, various sides of my family connections that were much closer to Naples itself, but the family that I'm connected with live a little further away in an area called Cilento. And there is also my business partner, Ariana. We run our travel company together, and Ariana, along with her sister Raffaella, run a small boutique resort with the most beautiful view of the Amalfi and the Cilento coast. So that's where I go. That's my home base when I'm there. Mario, the chef at the resort, who's also Ariana's life partner, used to work in Naples and opened a Michelin-starred restaurant there. So everybody in the area is still pretty connected to Pestum. It's like if you live in Westchester and you're commuting into New York, living in Pestum, taking the train an hour into Naples is a similar experience. Everybody's pretty connected to the city. It's funny though, because I think I'm much more in love with Naples. For them, it's like, oh, the city. It's crowded, it's expensive. I can't find any place to park. Like all the same things that I complain about in New York, they complain about with Naples. But then I reintroduce the city to them. There's been a few times where we've gone into the city together to go out to dinner or to go to a party or an event, and I'm pointing out monuments. I'm like, this was built in 2000 and blah, 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 blah. And they're learning from me, which is really fun. And it was the same thing. They came to New York in February, and I was being very grumpy about New York. And they were looking up at the skyscrapers and going, Ma che meraviglia. And I had a new appreciation of New York through their eyes.
That's so true. And that's happened to me with New York because I'm from Alabama and I moved to New York in 2015. I had family, my uncle here, but everything in New York, and talking about this podcast, Good Night, New York, I Love You, it's so exciting for me. And it's the same kind of connection that you're describing that you have with Naples. It really was a place where I could be authentically myself. And I've had New Yorkers say to me, oh, it's really nice to hear you talk about New York in that way because it helps me have that appreciation that when you're around it every single day for your whole life growing up with it, you take that part for granted.
Yeah, my dad was a New York City bus driver.
Yeah.
So focusing on traffic is something I'm prone to.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to this notion of community. Tell me how you've formed and what your community looks like in Naples.
It's a mix of a lot of people that I work with. So a lot of people are professional tour guides or drivers or Airbnb hosts that I've become friends with over the years. But even when I'm not spending time with the people that I've met in Naples, I never feel lonely. It's such an easy place to be social. Honestly, I'm a person who likes to be alone. I don't mind traveling alone at all. So sometimes in Naples, I'm like, oh my gosh, leave me alone. It happens all the time that if you're just walking down the street, an older person in particular will just strike up a conversation with you. And they will walk with you and they will go off of their route. And when you say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I've got to go, I've got to get into the train," they're like, "Oh, I was really enjoying speaking with you." So if you're friendly, even if you don't speak Italian, Naples is a really easy place to just find random people to talk to.
Every time I've gone to Italy, I've had the same experience. Not necessarily with random people stopping me, and I'm not fluent in Italian, so there's a language barrier depending on who I'm talking to. But I feel the same way where even if I'm alone, I don't feel lonely. I think it goes back to what you were saying about this hospitable culture. I think that the culture of a city you can feel, and that can affect how you move through the city and the peace that you feel with yourself, even if you're alone.
Yeah, and you're never alone in Naples. There's always somebody around. I'm always surprised when I look at the population numbers because they're not very, I mean, especially as compared to New York. It's something like 3 million people in the Naples metro area, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like there are millions and millions of people and they are all standing right next to you. It is very hard to be alone in Naples.
Yeah. I want to know if there's any other parts of your identity that have been shaped by your time in Naples.
I think it's just allowed me to become more and more myself. And I think certainly for anybody with Italian American heritage, Naples can be an eye opener, even if your family is Sicilian. The thing about Naples and Southern Italy in general that people don't really know, especially people of Italian American heritage, is that it was a kingdom up until 1861. Technically, the nation of Italy is much younger than the United States. The South was a kingdom with really a feudal system in place, and that has shaped so much of Italian American identity. That history was really repressed after Italian unification. There was a lot of economic hardship imposed on Southern Italy by taxation, which is the only reason that I'm having this conversation with you in the United States and not from Italy. And that is the case for most Italian Americans. Their ancestors did not want to leave the land that they came from. They were all economic refugees. The capital of that kingdom was Naples. And it was an enormous and powerful capital. The only other city that rivaled Naples in the 1700s and early 1800s was Paris. This is a heritage that not a lot of people know of because of the political situation that followed. But when you go to Naples, a lot of things click into place if you have Italian American heritage. It certainly did for me. And the more I've learned and studied about it, I mean, I'm a history geek, so I'm naturally inclined to dig into these things. But it has really illuminated so many things. I just remember this one of the first times I went to Naples, I was on the train going to Pompeii. You take what's essentially the commuter rail, like the Italian version of Long Island Railroad to get there. I was just sitting there looking at all the people sitting on the train, and I was like, that guy looks like my Uncle Sonny. That guy looks like my dad. That looks like my grandmother. Oh, right, because we're all related. Then I went to Pompeii, and then I'm looking at the mosaics, and I'm looking at faces that once again looked like mine because I'm like, oh, yeah, these are actually my ancestors. So just that sense of connection that I felt through my heritage was so profound, and just certain gestures, certain ideas really clicked into place for me.
There's a lot that I want to dig into here related to this feeling of familiarity with a place that you had never seen before because it's your family history. Also, you said that most people who leave Naples didn't want to leave, but they had to for economic reasons. I think this is really important to keep in mind when we think about immigration and the tension between the new place that you settle into, and you might love it, and you might have things that you love about that place, but you have this tension with the other place that you call home because there's a pull between the two places. What else
Well,
would you say about that?
think about a classic New York pizzeria or Italian restaurant. What's always painted on the wall? The Bay of Naples, Mount Vesuvius. Italian immigration was at its peak in the 1920s. There was a law passed that ended immigration from Southern Europe. It was really trying to limit the number of Southern Italians and Jewish people coming into the United States. That was over 100 years ago. And think about how strong the Italian identity still is today. People are still deeply attached to that. People did not want to leave, and they remained Italian in the other places that they went because of that. They held on to the food. The language had to be lost in World War II because when Mussolini declared war on the United States, the Italians that were here needed to make sure they were demonstrating whose side they were on. The language was lost at that time, but the food and the traditions never were. And it was not cool to be Italian back then. Now it's cool, but it absolutely was not back then. But I think if you just realize that classic, like Mount Vesuvius, Bay of Naples painting that you see on a pizzeria wall, that is a longing, that is an homage, that's a way of somebody staying in their home emotionally, even though they are very much in a different place. And I feel like many Italian Americans, and my family included, my grandmother, who I grew up with and was very close to, loved this country and was greatly appreciative of all the opportunities that it brought to our family. I think she was only educated to the sixth grade. I have a master's degree that was a tremendous source of pride for her. But Italian culture and Italian food, always the best.
You're very right that Italians have preserved their culture in a way that I think a lot of immigrant groups have not been able to. And it does really speak to this pull that they have to home. And now people talk about all the time, every American wants to go to Italy. Italy is so glamorized and romanticized, but it wasn't always that way.
No.
And it wasn't easy for Italian immigrants. And so to be able to preserve the culture, even while it was difficult, is a really beautiful tradition too.
Even through, I would say, the 80s and the 90s, in rooms in the world of New York City culture, because I used to work in the museum world, where there's still a very old guard in place, where I've heard comments about Italians still being coarse. That was the code word that I heard. All
Mhm.
these years later, it's still there for certain groups, but certainly Italy is, I think, the number one destination now in Europe. It surpassed France in the past couple of years. Every region of Italy is completely different. So you have a different culture in every region, a different cuisine. If you're an Italian American, start with Naples.
I love that. So you've talked a lot about what you receive from Naples, and you've alluded to what you give as well, because you teach other people about Italy, you teach them about Naples. You also promote a more holistic understanding of what the culture is like. But I'm curious if you have anything else to say about what you give and receive in your relationship with Naples.
It's telling its story. That's what is really healthy in the world of tourism today, especially because there's so much over tourism, toxic tourism, where people are just going and checking things off of a list. No, we have a limited amount of time in a country. I'm not totally critical of that experience. When I go to Paris, I want to see the Eiffel Tower, sure. But telling deeper stories is a way to connect people more deeply to a place and to have a more meaningful experience. My graduate studies, I was studying in Florence and I was studying the Florentine Renaissance, but then I actually switched my focus and studied the Renaissance in Naples, which is at that time not very well studied at all, certainly not by any English speakers. I was one of a handful of English speakers studying that. But there's this extraordinary artistic heritage in Naples that was really obscured by World War II because there was so much bombing and there was so much damage. Slowly, that is still coming to light. So culturally, I feel like I have contributed to shining a light on this glorious history and these works of art. And the more people go to see them, the more money that flows toward these museum sites so things can get fixed. Conservators can restore things, things can be put on display, things can travel, and that helps to bring revenue to these cultural institutions. I feel like I'm making some contribution to the cultural life of the city and also becoming part of its history myself in a more tangible way. And certainly I do promote tourism there, but I don't promote it to everybody. I usually try to get a sense of people before they go because I really only want people who are going to really fall in love with it. And one of my questions is, how do you feel about New York City? And if people are like, New York's not my place, we don't even have the conversation. I just move right on to where I think is a more appropriate destination for them. But if they say, oh, New York is awesome, I'm like, all right, here we go.
You're gonna love Naples, let me tell
Yeah.
you. I love the connection between New York and Naples. I wasn't even aware until this conversation. But we talked about your current relationship with this place. You live there about half the year, but you're going back and forth.
Back and
Uh,
forth, yeah.
yeah. Are you still visiting any other places in Italy, or is it almost always Naples that you go?
Oh, yeah, I'm always visiting other places for research to connect with new tour operators, drivers, guides. My clients, we work throughout Italy and we have resources and guides in all 20 regions of Italy. But for myself, it doesn't really feel like a trip unless I touch down in Naples. For a few months of the year, there's actually a direct flight from Newark Airport to Naples, which is what I'm taking. I'm taking the last one of 2025. And it always just feels like arriving home when I land there. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I do travel around to other parts of Italy and they feel profoundly different. Sometimes I have to I have to etch a sketch my head of Naples to properly appreciate the place that I'm in and stop comparing it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that you feel a pull between your two homes? I'm gonna go out and say that you have two homes, New York and Naples. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I really wish I could split myself in two. It is hard. I feel guilty sometimes that I'm not in Naples, especially when something big is going on and I'm watching it. My friends commenting or posting about it on Instagram. I'm like, oh, I should be there. Why am I here? But then this is my home. This is my base. I pay taxes here. I have a car. I have a dog who's named Lenu after the main character in My Brilliant Friend, which was, of course, set in Naples. So yeah, I always feel the pull to be in one or the other. New York area is my base, so usually I'm feeling more guilty about not being in Naples. And when I'm in Naples, I know that again, not the place that I pay taxes. So I'm actually pretty present when I'm there because I know that I will be returning home.
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to this feeling of feeling split into between the place where you live and maybe your homeland. For me, that's Alabama. I feel like I split my time between New York and Alabama because my family lives there. I have nieces and nephews and my parents. I feel the same way sometimes, where I feel guilty when I'm not there and something big's going on. But New York is also my home and it's my base. And so dealing with that tension, I think, is something a lot of people experience.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that that resonates with?
No, I've thought about it as a problem to solve, but I've changed my thinking on that, which is how lucky am I that I have two places where I want to be? I feel so alive that I want to be alive in two places at once. I'm pretty lucky.
I love that reframing. I love that reframe because it helps us settle the dissonance that we have for being separated from one or the other.
Yeah. When people say, oh, I'm bored, I think, again, how lucky am I? I don't know what that's like because I have so many things that fascinate me about Naples that I'm usually reading about or thinking about. And then here in New York, too, even though I've been in and around the city my whole life, I always just think, I got to go walk around that neighborhood. I haven't walked around that neighborhood in a long time. I've got to go back to the museum that I've been to a gajillion times, but it's always a different experience. It's so great to have these places. I like places that have like lots of little corners and nooks and crannies to explore. For me, that really gives me my life force, gets me really excited. And so I appreciate having two cities that give that to me.
There's a lot of intentionality behind what you're saying. I hear people talking about struggling with loneliness or feeling stuck in their lives and their 9 to 5 in some way and not being able to break out of whatever norm that they're living. What you're describing is this intentionality of let me think about places that I love in these cities. And if I haven't been there in a long time, let me go and let me remind myself why I love it so much.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to approach our community and nurturing that relationship of love with that place.
Yeah, because these places are always changing.
Mm.
New York, my God, how much it has changed. The skyline, is completely different than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago. It changes so much, and sometimes I can get really cranky about that. When I'm walking around the West Village, I'm like, I remember when this was a this and that was a that, and I have to consciously decide to stop that and accept the city for what it is. Then I feel like it's a new city for me too, and I can appreciate that. So identity is a huge part of New York and Naples. Neapolitans are fiercely proud of their city, but that's a city that's changing as well. But it's so much older, nearly 3,000 years old, and yet it still changes and retains a strong identity all at the same time. So these are also really fascinating things to contemplate. And these cities are changing, but we're changing too. The expression is you never step into the same river twice.
Mm.
And so cities function that same way.
I had a similar conversation with another guest on the pod. Krupa was talking about Lisbon. She was saying, I really love Lisbon. And what is so interesting about being in Lisbon is seeing the new and the old right next to each other, which we see in New York. You're describing it in Naples as well. But one thing that she pulled from that is thinking about how we're going through a big change or a big transition, we sometimes want to just dive into the new identity or the new iteration, but it's our past selves that helped us become that person. And we can think about it the same way with a place. All of those layers and histories that you were talking about of Naples helped make the Naples that it is today. And we can be resistant to change as humans, but it's also a beautiful thing to see how it's evolved and how it shapes our identity as it evolves.
All of the events that have happened, the wars, the plagues, all of these things have all contributed to our particular bag of generational experiences and trauma, too.
Mhm.
All of these things really shape us. Another reason why I find history so fascinating. But you can see behind me right now, this is a sign with my last name on it. This was the sign on the side of my grandfather's delivery truck from his butcher shop in the Bronx. I wasn't particularly close with this grandfather, but for me, I love this sign. It was always hanging in the garage in my childhood home. And when my dad passed away, I made sure that I took it. It's my own personal layer cake of history, like Naples is. I love being able to access those different pieces visually and viscerally when you travel to just contemplate how we got to where we are today.
I noticed on your website that you have a guide for Little Italy in New York, and I was expecting to see Little Italy in Manhattan, but I noticed that it's actually for the Bronx. Do you want to say anything about Little Italy in the Bronx and where your family's from?
Yeah, my Arthur Avenue side of the family is my dad's family. My mom's side of the family is who I'm connected to in Italy. My Arthur Avenue side were from the Naples area, and they settled on Arthur Avenue in 1918 and opened up what was a bacala store. And then it was turned into a butcher shop. The butcher shop is still there today. My family does not own it anymore, but it's was sold to another butcher in the area, and it's kept pretty much the same. I started very informally leading food tours in that area. Basically, somebody asked a favor to lead a group of food buyers from Marks and Spencer in London around Arthur Avenue because they were in New York City visiting different ethnic enclaves to do research. At that time, Anthony Bourdain was becoming really popular with no reservations on the Travel Channel, and I just thought, hey, I could turn this into something. Like I got paid $500 in cash to do that. I was working at a museum at the time, making like $40,000 a year. So 500 bucks cash was like, wow. I started very slowly. It took years for me to build up to actually launching a full scale tour company. But eventually I did, and it has grown. And every Saturday, there is a tour called the Shopping and Tasting Tour of Arthur Avenue. I don't often lead them anymore. I have a bunch of guides and they take people around the neighborhood, but it's a little different than a regular food tour. And I'm very clear about this in the description. People taste food, you have all sorts of samples, you have a sit down lunch, but it's not a stuff your face food tour. The whole point is actually to hear the stories of these shops and to highlight their ingredients and their traditions in order to encourage people to keep shopping there. Because Little Italy in Manhattan. It's a bunch of restaurants. I think there's just DePaulo's left in terms of shops where you can buy ingredients. That's because Italians that cook like that all move to the suburbs, and you can't drive down to Mulberry Street and park, but you can on Arthur Avenue. So you have all of these old shops. Many of them are over 100 years old, still selling the same things and still making the same things that they always made. It's an incredible anomaly, not just in New York City, but really in the United States. I feel a responsibility to keep sending people there to shop. The shopping and tasting tour is a very deliberate, intentional vehicle to introduce people to these shops and to help sustain them for another generation.
When you talk about the responsibility, are you thinking about the sustainability piece, or is there something else you're thinking about?
I'm thinking about the fact that these are very human businesses, that there are three bakeries that make fresh bread every day, which is a business with the tiniest of profit margins. And the only reason the bread on Arthur Avenue is so good is because these are still families who are making that bread and their mortgages have been paid off since 1934. You can't afford to make beautiful bread anymore. Even in some hipster boulangerie where the bread costs 12 bucks and the people in the neighborhood buy it, that doesn't even last that long because people just don't want to spend 12 bucks on bread, no matter how much money you have, you know? Making bread is one of the most ancient human experiences, and the fact that you can still have that experience for a very good price in the Bronx is not nothing. I actually think it's really meaningful. I'm not solving world peace, obviously, but I think I feel compelled on a deeper level to continue to support these traditions, which are just so much part of the human experience, especially as our world becomes much more digital and intangible.
People really crave those experiences. They want to hear stories and they're drawn into that and they want to experience things for themselves. You were talking about tourism, and I heard you talk about on your podcast how TikTok has made tourism so different and people seeing videos online because they want to have these experiences for themselves. But no matter what the motivation is, there's a lot of value in seeing how a whole nother group of people live that might not be the same way you do, but you can learn to appreciate that. I think that's really amazing. You talked about falling in love with Naples. Have you ever fallen out of love with New York or Naples along the way? I mean, it's a years long relationship at this point. Have there ever
Yeah.
been moments like that?
Yeah, there was a point, I wouldn't say I fully fell out of love, but where we maybe broke up for a little while. There was a period in, I think it was about 2007, early 2008, where there was a big garbage crisis going on in Naples. There was basically a strike and it was related to the mafia and the trash wasn't getting picked up. I actually happened to be there right when that broke out. And it was not a pleasant time to be there. There was trash everywhere. And more than that, because Naples has got a lot of garbage to begin with. It's a city with narrow streets and the garbage cans are often overflowing. It's not necessarily the most tidy place to begin with, but everybody there was in a bad mood because the citizens of the city were just dealing with this and they were embarrassed and it was difficult and there was just a bad vibe. I actually left a few days early and went back to Rome where I was flying back from and stayed there instead. I felt a little guilty about leaving, but I just felt such a bad energy and I didn't want to be part of it. It was maybe a couple of years before I went back. And then when I did go back, I went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I left you for so long. I know you were just having a bad moment." And it's over. Things have steadily improved since then. But yeah, there was that one time. As far as New York, yeah, I get annoyed with New York a lot. Both cities are difficult to live in. They're congested, they're crowded, they're difficult, they're expensive for the people that live there.
Yeah, I saw a video online the other day. Have you seen this Subway Takes guy who does interviews with people on the subway? And he says,
Mhm.
"What's your take?" And somebody said, "You have to hate New York to love it."
Yeah, it'd be crazy not to hate New York sometimes. It's difficult. It's
Yeah.
not an easy place to live at all. Neither is Naples. Not an easy place to live.
There's
It-
no rose-colored glasses here.
no,
We're
no.
accepting that it's not an easy place to live, but at the same time, I can be 100% myself. I have this sense of home. I have this familiarity.
Yeah, there's no place else like it. It's such a unique culture and it's such a distinct culture. It's one that really welcomes you in. I lived in Boston for 1 year. That city also has a distinct identity, but it was very much like, yeah, if you don't like it, leave. Who cares? New Yorkers have a gruff attitude, but it's still a city of transplants,
Mhm.
and that makes all the difference.
Mhm. I think there's a lot to say too for even when you have a period where you're unhappy with a place that you love, staying really committed to that place and knowing that, you know what, I love this place anyway, and I'm still going to come back. There's still a million reasons why I love it, even if I'm not happy with it right now.
Well, and I think the trick is with New York, you got to recognize when it's not at its best. Like you got to get out in August. You got to go somewhere for a week. You got to get out. You got to, and in the middle of winter too, you got to go somewhere
I was
or
going to say February is the other month that I am adamant you have to get out in February.
you got to break it up. You can't be in the city all the time.
Absolutely. Well, I have one more question. I like to end the podcast by asking my guests to describe their ideal day in whatever place we talked about. So, Danielle, can you describe your ideal day in Naples?
Ideal day in Naples would be a morning of walking or wandering, and it doesn't matter which neighborhood, but let's go into the Pina Seca market, which is an open air market in Naples. There used to be many more open air markets. They're getting smaller, but this one is still a historic market. You can buy everything outside from slippers to clams. There's a lot of seafood that's outside on the street. Have lunch, something local, something inexpensive. One of the things I love about Naples is that everything is pretty affordable. Then spending the whole afternoon after all the tour buses are gone in the Archaeological Museum, which is right in the middle of the city. And it's where all of the treasures from Pompeii are kept, all of the frescoes and the mosaics and the jewelry. It's an enormous museum. I've been dozens of times, but you can always find something new. Of course, you can always revisit everything. But that experience of wandering around Naples, feeling its life, having something really good to eat, and then going into that museum, which is one of the best museums in the world, for me is a pretty extraordinary day.
It sounds extraordinary. I hope to try it one day.
Yeah, you got to go.
Is there anything else you would want to share or touch on about Naples that we didn't cover?
No, I think as a Naples evangelist, I will also say I recognize when people don't like it, and I get it. Like I could understand why you don't like a city where everybody's yelling and the traffic is crazy and the streets don't make sense. But I will say the one area where I still get irrationally annoyed is when somebody says, "Oh, but somebody told me that Naples is dangerous," even the way I'm repeating it. When somebody says that, I get so annoyed. You don't expect a city to be dressed up for company. I love Florence, Venice, and Rome, but those cities, in large part, are dressed up for company.
Mhm.
Naples is not. And that's what makes it amazing. Don't go expecting to be accommodated and catered to. You are a visitor. Immerse yourself in that experience and be open to it. If you're not open to doing that, then don't go. But if you really want to travel, not be a tourist, Naples is an amazing city.
Thank you, Danielle. I can't wait to go to Naples now. I'm going to make my uncles take me. Didn't that conversation with Danielle make you want to go to Naples, Italy? I loved hearing her talk about falling in love with Naples at first sight and growing her connection to this place over the years. Thanks for tuning in, and remember that in each episode, I'll interview a new guest about a place they love. So tune in next time. This is Good Night, New York. I love you.